So here I am, I'm back again, and I wanted to talk about the silence related to my eating disorder. Um, I grew up in a situation in which, I felt like I couldn't control anything, but I was also living in fear. So, one way that the fear would manifest itself in me would be panic attacks. And so, um, I would have, in my younger years, sometimes 4 or 5 panic attacks a day. And I got used to it. It was just part of my life. But when you are hurting and you're having something happen to you, you find a way to cope. And initially, the way that I found relief was in food. I would just eat. I felt the panic attack come on, and I would just eat. And it made me feel better. And so, at the time, I never thought of that as an eating disorder. You know, I had been called big and fat most of my life. So, it sort of, to me, was like, okay, you're not attractive. You've been abused. No one's protecting you. You're not really worthy of anything. And so this is what you do to control the pain. As I got older, I had a desire to not be the fat girl anymore. But I still had these panic attacks and these anxiety moments. And I'd gotten to the point where I could have a panic attack and be quiet because I've been having them for so long. So I could have a panic attack, and someone might think that I was just gazing off into space, or you know, um, just not paying attention to what they were saying. Where inside my body was seizing up, and I was just going through hell. And so, as soon as I could, I needed to get my medicine, and that was food. And so I would eat. And then, that idea of wanting not to be fat, because, everyone is telling me that you're fat. And one of the things that my abuser used to do was call me things like big and fridge, sort of reinforce that idea that I was unattractive. And so I would eat and eat and eat until I got to the point in which I was full and the feeling was gone. But then the panic sets in about, being overweight. So then I would purge. And it was just a cycle, because sometimes during the day when you're having more than one panic attack, it's this cycle that has to keep going on. Well, I got older, and, I went to college, and, it's a little bit harder to hide some of those things. I mean, originally I didn't think about it as an eating disorder, but as I, went to college and, I got more information, I knew what it was, but what was I going to do to change it? I'd been to therapy on my own a couple of times, and I would never go more than once because, you could see as you tell your story and you look across at these people and like they're mortified, you know, and that like contributed to the fact that I didn't want to say it out loud again. Everyone thinks that what is happening or has happened to you is so bad. And you're like, okay, so not only am I fat, but my story is so grotesque that, even the therapist is in tears. So, you know, I started to, just I would give up on therapy very quickly. And most of the time in therapy, I never brought up that I was suffering from an eating disorder in order to control panic attacks. And I never really admitted to the panic attacks. As a kid, I would just like burst out into tears sometimes because I couldn't hold him in. And everyone used to always say, oh, she's such a crybaby. But it was just, I couldn't breathe. And so my medicine was food. As I got older, I wanted to control these panic attacks in a different way. And so in college, I started running. And I would find that if I was getting ready to have a panic attack, if I started to run, that like the air could come back in. It would do something for me. So I would run. And I would run and run until they were done. Well, obviously, the effect of that was that, you know, when you're running, you begin to lose weight. And I saw that as a plus. So I would run, and I really stopped the binging, and I just wouldn't talk about it. That was just what it was. By the time I gave birth to my second child, you know, I had gained a considerable amount of weight going through fertility treatments. And I had a doctor that said to me that basically, you know, the only reason why I would be seeing him is because I was fat, that I just really needed to stop eating myself to death. And it sort of turned a switch off in my head, and I was like, okay, here I am, I have these two kids, and I want to live, I want to be here for them, but what am I going to do that? Well, I already had an eating disorder, so my idea of what was going to happen to make that happen wasn't going to be normal. So, you know, once again, I was still having panic attacks, and my husband never even knew I was having panic attacks. I never shared with anyone that I was having panic attacks. It was just a part of my life, you know. So I would run. I would do workout DVDs. So during the day, I'd probably run, do 2 workout DVDs, and that's how I took care of the problem. I took care of the panic attacks, and I took care of the weight at the same time. And I got into that cycle for about almost 4 or 5 years. Started a blog, had a page, people calling me, asking me how I was doing it, and I just kept going. There was no option not to go to the gym. There was no option not to run. There were foods that I just couldn't eat. And I just didn't talk to anybody about this because everyone thought it was a great thing, you know, to see you lose the weight, you know. So I ran and I worked out until my body couldn't take it anymore. And so I couldn't run anymore. You know, it was just, I just ran my body out. And as a result, I either needed to start eating to get these panic attacks under control, or find an alternative. And I decided that the alternative would have to be getting out, because I just didn't want to live that life anymore. And I told someone. And saying it out loud, all the things that I was doing just to get through the day, to a room full of women who knew what I was talking about, changed my life. I had a voice, and it gave voice to so many things because of all of the issues that I was dealing with. There were so many that, you know, I needed to talk about it. I needed to say, this is where my life was. This is what my life was. So that I could live. So that I could eat. You know, so that I could be what I consider a fantastically normal person. So I'm not silent about it anymore. I will probably always have an eating disorder. I always have to think about certain things just to make sure I'm doing the right thing. But instead of running or eating or, the binging and purging to control my panic attacks, I've used my voice and I've been able to talk about it. And, I've gone from having 3 to 5 a day to sometimes maybe having one a week. And so that means that my voice is very, very powerful, and that my voice is healing, and that being silent is damaging.